السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي خلق اللوح والقلم وعلم الإنسان ما لم يعلم، والصلاة والسلام على سيد العرب والعجم وعلى آله وأصحابه والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله تعالى عنهم أجمعين. أما بعد. So as our Shaikh Rahman Hafidhahullah, in the previous lecture he explained the position of the Sunnah in Islam and how the ulama, starting from the time of the Sahaba, how they struggled to preserve the Sunnah. So now the Shaykh, inshallah, he will explain this further in the second part of his series, مقدمة في علوم الحديث, an introduction to the science of Hadith. So now I'll pass it over to the Shaykh. فليتفضل مشكورا ومأجورا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. As you remember that in our last talk we discussed in detail that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He helped this ummah to preserve the sunnah and ahadith of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the amazing science and the amazing stories of our predecessors. This is not a formal talk, this is only a discussion, and also to seek the barakah of discussing these great pious predecessors, aslaf, because when you discuss the pious people, you also get the barakah. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He commanded His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Quran, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مُوسَى وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِسْمَاعِيلَ. Remember in the book the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. So we are here to discuss these pious people, their efforts, their struggles, just like we are sitting with them, just like we are sitting with Sahaba, with Tabi'un, with Muhaddithin. I remember the Abdullah bin Mubarak rahimahullah, because it was his routine, just after finishing prayer, he used to go to his home. And people, they used to like to sit with him, but he was so busy. Once someone, he asked him, what matter with you? Really, we see you here. Why do you spend most of your time at home? He replied a beautiful answer. He said, at what point to sit with people? أجلس مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم والصحابة. I sit with Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and his companions, because I spend most of my time in reading a hadith. And when I read a hadith, it is just like sitting with Prophet and Sahaba. So here when we discuss these people, it means that we are just like talking to them, sitting with them and seeking the barakah of remembrance of these pious people. So as we discussed in our last talk, that how our aslaf, ulama, muhaddithun, they traveled long journeys, long distance, thousands of miles, because it was not easy to become alim in that time. No muhaddith ever sat at home and wrote his book. No muhaddith. They had to travel thousands of miles. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and other Aimma Ikram. So we discussed in detail in our last talk. So today, inshallah, I would like to discuss in brief the history of compilation of the books of ahadith, how these books were compiled and how these ahadith ahadith were collected, the efforts of the Islam. Because most of the people, they have some confusion regarding the books of ahadith. They say, some believe, because these books were compiled in the 3rd century, most of the books. Because when we discuss the books of ahadith, we first think about Bukhari, Muslim, and Sahih Sitta, and these books were compiled in the 3rd century. So they feel that in the first 2 centuries, there were no books written. This is misunderstanding. And some people, there is objection, especially those who do not accept ahadith, Munkrin ahadith. They say, how on earth someone is able to write down hadith after 3 centuries, after 2 centuries of the Prophet's death. So this is misunderstanding. There is a great Shaikh Mustafa al-A'zami, Hafizahullah. He has done master a PhD. His thesis in PhD was the books written in the first 2 centuries after the death of Prophet, in the first 2 centuries of Islam. So he has mentioned hundreds of works, hundreds of scholars, muhaddithun, who wrote the books in the first 2 centuries of our Islamic history. In the first 2 centuries. There are hundreds of books there were, but these books were just like the personal notebooks. They were not formal and proper and books intended to mass distribution. They were personal notebooks for personal benefits. And actually writing of books started in the age of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the age of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the beginning, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forbade his Sahaba to write down anything except Quran. There is authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to his Sahaba, "La taktubu anni shay'an illa al-Quran." Don't write from me anything except Quran. وَمَنْ كَتَبَ عَنِّي شَيْئًا غَيْرَ الْقُرْآنِ فَلْيَمْحُهُ. He who has written anything from me apart from Quran, he should wipe it out, remove that, delete that. And then he said, وَحَدِّثُوا عَنِّي فَلَا حَرَجْ. And narrate a hadith from me to people, then there is no harm in that. وَمَنْ كَذَبَ عَلَيَّ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ. This is a complete hadith. He who has narrated anything, he was lied upon me, so he must prepare his place abode in hellfire. The hadith is Sahih Muslim. So this was in the beginning, in the early era of our deen, when this Quran was being revealed on, and there was fear that it could be mixed up with ahadith. So the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade Sahaba to write down anything except Quran. He appointed Sahaba to write down the verses of Quran. But afterward, if someone believes in these ahadith, that Prophet ﷺ, he forbade Sahaba, there is some other ahadith. Why we neglect those ahadith? It is authentic hadith, the Sahih hadith, Rahman, he had declared hadith is Sahih. The Prophet ﷺ, the narrator is Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As radiyallahu ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said, قَيِّدُ الْعِلْمَ بِالْكِتَابَ. That preserve knowledge by writing it down. He commanded Sahaba to write down ilm. And ilm is Quran and Hadith. And I discussed in our last talk that Abdullah bin Amr bin As radiyallahu ta'ala, he says that I used to write down all of the sayings of Prophet. Abdullah bin Amr bin As radiyallahu ta'ala, he is the narrator of more than 700 ahadith. Abdullah bin Amr bin As. More than 700 ahadith narrated alone. And he said that I used to write down all of the sayings of Prophet ﷺ. And some of my colleagues, they said, why do you write down everything from Prophet? He is a human being. And sometimes he is in angry mood and sometimes he is joking. Well, you shouldn't write down everything from the Prophet ﷺ. So he stopped writing. Once Prophet ﷺ, he realized that Abdullah is not writing my hadith, so he asked him, Abdullah, why are you not writing? So he said, my colleague, they said to me these words, that you are a human being and sometimes you are joking, sometimes you are angry. So it is not good to write down everything from you. The Prophet نفس محمد بيده ما يخرج منه إلا حق. Write down, because by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in whose hand is my soul, nothing comes out of my mouth except truth. Even he is joking, it is always truth. There are jokes of Prophet. Once we discussed the jokes of Prophet in our khutbah, and even he is joking, we learn some ahadith, we learn some fiqh of our deen, we correct our aqidah. Just like a joke of Prophet that once a lady, old woman, came to the Prophet and said, Prophet, make dua, O Allah, to enter me into Jannah. The Prophet said that old ladies, they will not enter into Jannah. So she was old lady. So she started crying. So he said, you will become virgin, young. The old ladies, they will be transformed into a young lady. So we learn Aqidah. He was joking, but it was truth. And we learn Aqidah that old people, inshallah, when they will enter Jannah, they will be young. And another hadith, there are so many jokes of Prophet ﷺ, and one, he was joking with Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. He said that Aisha, because both of the Prophet ﷺ and Aisha both had a headache. So Prophet ﷺ said to Aisha, if you die in my life, I would give you ghusl, and I will provide you kafan, and I will bury you. So Sayyida Aisha said that I know that you will get happy if I die in your life, because you will play with another your wife. So Prophet he was making joke, but we learn from this joke that a husband, he can give ghusl to his wife from this hadith of him. This is not joke only, this is also fiqh from our deen. So he said, اكتب فوالذي نفس محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم بيده ما يخرج منه إلا حق. Nothing comes out of my mouth except truth. So Prophet ﷺ, he used to narrate a hadith, and Sahaba, they used to write down, they used to listen. So he commanded Abdullah bin Amr bin As that you carry on writing. And Abdullah bin Amr bin As, he had a special sahifa. Sahifa, you can say, personal notebook. So his work is called as-sahifa as-sadiqa. We mentioned in our last talk. So Abdullah bin Amr bin As, he said that nothing is better to me in this world except two things. One is as-sahifa as-sadiqa. The second is al-wahda. Wahda is a piece of land that his father, Amr bin As, he donated in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was supervisor of that piece of land. He said, I love that piece of land because it is waqf in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I am caretaker of that piece of land. So these two things I love most in this world. So he has special box for this sahifa, and if any matter comes, so he used to consult that sahifa. Likewise, some other Sahaba, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he also had a sahifa. Sayyida Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, she said that my father, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he had a sahifa. So he had written down 500 ahadith. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, he is the narrator of 500 ahadith. So the Sahaba, they loved our Prophet sallallahu. They used to sit with the Prophet. There are Ashab Sufa, around about 60 Sahaba. So they had nothing in this world except to sit with the Prophet ﷺ, to listen his ahadith day and night. And among Sahaba, there are some Sahaba who had read 100 ahadith, some 200, some 300, some 500. There are 7 Sahaba who have narrated more than 1,000 ahadith. And on the top there is Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, who had only lived a time of 3 years to stay with the Prophet sallam, but he was so eager, so keen to learn a hadith. We discussed in our last talk that Prophet sallam, he made a special dua for Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, that Allah give him tawfiq to remember all of my hadith and never to forget them. So this dua was accepted. And he said, after this dua, whatever I heard from Prophet ﷺ, I never forgot. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he had divided the night into 3 parts. First part for learning a hadith, one part for learning a hadith, for memorization of a hadith, one part for sleep, and one part for ibadah, for qiyamul layl. Even Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, even after getting this dua, sharp memory, he divided every night into 3 parts. And one part he used to memorize a hadith, to revise. And even Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, in the beginning he was not writing down the hadith, but afterward he started. He also had a sahifa. And his students, they used to write down all of the hadiths narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala. So there are more than 5,000 ahadith, 5,300 ahadith that are narrated by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala. 5,300 ahadith. Then comes the second sahabi, the Prophet Sallam's khadim, his servant, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala, who spent 10 years with the Prophet Sallallahu. 10 years. He was a khadim of Prophet Sallallahu. And he has narrated 2,260 ahadith. 2,260 ahadith narrated by only Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala. And then comes the wife of Prophet Sallallahu, Sayyida Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who narrates 2,230 ahadith. Less than 30 hadith, less than Anas ibn Malik radiallahu. And then comes Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the Prophet Sallam's cousin. He had narrated 1,600, more than 1,600 ahadith, only narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala. And then comes Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala. He also narrated more than 1,600 ahadith. And then comes Sayyidina Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, who had narrated 1,500 ahadith. Only Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala. And then comes Abu Sayyid Khudri radiallahu ta'ala, who had narrated 1,170 ahadith. Sayyid Abu Sayyid Khudri radiallahu ta'ala. So these are the 7 Sahaba who have narrated more than 1,000, each one of them. So these are the Sahaba's love for Prophet ﷺ, to learn hadith and to narrate. And as we discussed before, that if someone wanted to get knowledge, he had traveled in the all land of Islamic Khilafah. Because Sahaba, they were scattered. They traveled to different areas because of fighting, because of jihad. And they went to Syria, some of them went to Egypt, some of them Iraq, some of them stayed in Basra, Kufa, Makkah, Medina, and some other parts of the Islamic land. So the knowledge and ahadith were scattered. And most of the Sahaba, they had their halaqas, they had their own students, they used to dictate ahadith, they used to discuss ahadith. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he has his students, and some of his students, they had their sahifa, they used to write down their sahifa. Hammam bin Munabbih, the famous student of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, Hammam bin Munabbih. This sahifa had more than 100 ahadith, around about 130 ahadith. And this sahifa, and like for some other sahaba, Sayyidina Ali bin Murtala radiallahu ta'ala, he also had his sahifa. And Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu, she also had her own sahifa. But these sahaif, later on, these sahaif they were added into the major books. Because they were smaller works, containing 100 ahadith, 200 ahadith. They were not intended to distribute for people, they were for personal benefits. Later on, when the grand books were written and published, so just like Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, when he wrote on his Musnad, so this sahifa, Hammam bin Munabbih, he called his sahifa and he added his sahifa, put all of sahifa in his Musnad. In the name of Sahiba Hamamil Murabbi, in the same name. So this was the works of Sahaba in the lifetime of Prophet ﷺ. So it means that the ahadith were being written down even in the lifetime of Prophet ﷺ, in the age of Sahaba. But these were smaller works. And in Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, he commanded Ibn Shihab Zuhri and some other scholars to collect the hadith and to compile them. So it doesn't mean that the people that didn't have the hadith in written form, people they had, but it was not well organized. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, he appointed Ibn Shihab, and Ibn Shihab he was a great scholar. There is a joke that once a man, he was very angry with his wife, and he said, "You are divorced if Ibn Shihab rahimahullah doesn't memorize more than 100,000 ahadith. If he does not know 100,000 ahadith by heart, you are divorced." So this is a crazy person. So Ibn Shihab was concerned. He said, "She is not divorced because I know 200,000 ahadith by heart. I have memorized 200,000 ahadith." So these were great works, great efforts of Aimah. You know, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, it is reported that he had memorized more than 700,000 ahadith. Great Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, more than 700 ahadith. So when we discuss 700,000, it doesn't mean that 700 texts, because every text, the muhaddis, if he gets one text, one matan of hadith through different narrator from different chain, all these chains are considered different ahadith. Just like, let's quote the hadith, "Innamal a'malu binniyat." Every Muslim he knows by heart. "Innamal a'malu binniyat." Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala, he is the narrator of this hadith. So this only one hadith has 700 chains, 700 different chains. So this only one hadith is considered as equal to 700 hadith, because if a muhaddis gets this hadith, one from different chain, from another chain, all these chains, all these rawiyan are considered separate hadith. So Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, he knew 700,000 hadiths by heart, means different chains. And Imam Abu Zur'a, he is also reported about him that he also knew 700,000 ahadith. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he knew 300,000 ahadith by heart. He selected Sahih Bukhari out of 300,000 ahadith, 200,000 da'if ahadith and 100,000 sahih ahadith. Imam Muslim rahimahullah said that I selected my Sahih Muslim out of 300,000 hadiths which I learned, which I heard with my own ears. He memorized 300,000 hadiths. So there are some other great Salaf who memorized more than 100, 200, 300,000 hadiths. So these were their efforts to get the hadiths and to memorize them. And these Salaf had their hadiths in written form. Abdullah bin Mubarak rahimahullah, he had also his own sahifa. But the first work which was published for mass distribution for people to print out and to distribute among the people, it was Muwatta Imam Malik rahimahullah. Muwatta Imam Malik, the Imam al-Hijrah, who spent the whole of his life in Medina. He never traveled out of Medina except for Hajj. Even the kings of that time, they requested him to come to their Baghdad and other capitals, but he refused. "No, I don't want to leave the city of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." He loved so much the city of Medina, he never liked to go out of Medina. So he had a great shuyukh. Imam Malik rahimahullah, the teachers are the great teachers of that time. That one is Nafi, the student of Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu ta'ala. Nafi was a freed slave of Abdullah bin Umar and a great muhaddis of that time. So he had a chance to learn a hadith from Nafi Rahman. And also Rabi'a al-Rai. Rabi'a al-Rai was the greatest scholar of that time. Rabi'a al-Rai. Because his father, Abu Abdur Rahman, he was a mujahid. When he left his home, he left 30,000 coins, golden coins, great treasure in that time. And his wife spent all of this money for the education of his son, Rabi'a al-Rai. He was a small child at that time. And when his father came back, Rabi'a was grown up. At that time, he became a great scholar. Even father couldn't recognize his own son. And Rabi'a al-Rai, rahimahullah, he used to deliver lecture and read a hadith sitting in the masjid of Prophet ﷺ. And Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he had got a chance to sit in those halakat and to learn a hadith from Rabi'a al-Rai, from Nafi, from other great scholars of that time. And Imam Malik, rahimahullah, book is the best book. Some say that is the best book ever. Some say its rank is after Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, and some say after Sunan Tirmidhi. But the thing is that this is the best sanad, inshallah we'll discuss in our next talk, that the best chain and narrator is that comes to Imam Malik rahimahullah. And Imam Malik rahimahullah book, it is not included among Sihasita. Why it did not include it? The ulama said that because it did not contain only a hadith, it contained also his own personal opinions, and also it had a lot of mursal riwayat, not the hadith of Prophet aqwal of Sahaba and aqwal of other tabi'in. So that is the reason it is not included among the Sihasita. So this was the first work published and for people to get benefit from. And the second one was Musnad Abu Dawud Tayalisi. And Imam Malik rahimahullah, he was born in 93 Hijrah or 95 Hijrah. This was the age. It was the age of Sahaba. Because according to some history writer, the last Sahabi he died in 110 Hijrah. And Imam Malik rahimahullah, he was born in 93 Hijrah or 95 Hijrah. So he wrote down the book, and Imam Malik rahimahullah, he died 179 Hijrah. So this was the early time. This was the age of Sahaba, this was the age of Tabi'in. During that period, his grand book, Muwatta Imam Malik, that was published. And Musnad Imam Ahmad, that contained 40,000 ahadith. 40,000 ahadith. And Musnad is a book that is arranged in that book, the ahadith are arranged by the names of Sahaba. Mean the first chapter, all ahadith that which are narrated by Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, not by in fiqh or topics, but by the names of Sahaba, by the names of narrators. The ahadith reported by Abu Bakr Siddiq, all ahadith first which are reported by Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, then Umar Farooq radiyallahu anhu, then Ali al-Murdar, Uthman bin Affan, Ali al-Murdar radiyallahu anhu. That is Sahaba who took part in the Battle of Badr, Ahad al-Ashra Mubashira. So these were different levels. So Musnad Ahmad, there are over 40,000 ahadith. Musnad Abu Dawud Tayalisi, there are 41,000 ahadith. Musnad Imam Abu Dawud At-Tayalisi, rahimahullah, a great scholar. He was from Persia. And he had a sharp memory. The ulama said, we never saw anyone having more sharp memory than Abu Dawud Tayalisi. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created a great scholar in this ummah who devoted themselves. Imam Malik rahimahullah spent 60 years in teaching a hadith, in learning a hadith. Imam, you know the janaza of Sayyid Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, when he died, that was not the age of TV and newspaper and WhatsApp and messaging. And there are different reports. In one report, there are 2.5 million people participated offered janazah Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Mean 2,500,000 people. Even if there are 2 million to 2,100,000 people in the time when there was no news was not scattered because of TV or newspaper. So people, they flocked, they loved so much these great Aimma. And this is the second type of book. First is Muwatta, then second is Musnad. There are some other Musnad Imam Shafi'i, there are some other Musnad. And then comes Sahih, the book Sahih, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The proper name of Sahih Bukhari is Al-Jami' Al-Sahih Al-Mukhtasar Al-Bukhari min umuri Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa sunanihi wa ayyam. This is the proper name of Sahih Bukhari. We only name Sahih Bukhari mentioned. So Al-Jami' Al-Sahih, Al-Jami' Al-Musnad, Al-Sahih Al-Mukhtasar min umuri Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa sunanihi wa ayyami. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he selected the ahadith. They are around about 6,000 ahadith. But there are reputation because Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he had a unique style of quoting ahadith. He did use some fiqh ahkam from every hadith. So sometimes he narrate that hadith 4, 5, 6 times. There is one hadith that he has narrated and quoted that hadith 16 or 17 times. Every time he gets new masla, new hukam, new fiqh hukam from every hadith. So when you remove the repetition, so the actual hadith are around about 2,000 hadiths, more than 2,000 hadiths. So this is the most authentic book in hadith, Sahih Bukhari. There is not a single hadith which the scholar had any doubt, any doubt or any confusion regarding any narrator. So he selected these 6,000 hadiths out of 300,000. But it doesn't mean that Imam Bukhari, if he did not accept any hadith, it doesn't mean that hadith was da'if. But he had his own special criteria to pick a hadith. So the hadith which he did not pick, it doesn't mean that all those hadith were da'if. Then comes Sahih Muslim. Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he was also the student of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Scholars say, if there was not Imam Bukhari, this ummah was also have been deprived of Imam Muslim, because Imam Muslim was trained by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. And then there are Sunan. Sunan, a book of hadith where hadiths are arranged by fiqh topic. What the topic means, for example, Kitab al-Salah, Kitab al-Sawm, Kitab al-Zakah. And Jami book is which covered at least 8 main topics. Jami Bukhari, Jami Tirmidhi. Tirmidhi is also Jami and also Sunan. So a Jami book is which covered at least 8 main topics: Aqidah, Ahkam, Kitabul Ashriba, and also At'ima wa Shurb, and also Kitabul Fiqh. 8 main topics. So Bukhari, it deals with 8 main topics. And Sunan is a book which is written, the ahadith are quoted and arranged by fiqh topics. Kitab al-Salah, Kitab al-Sawm, Kitab al-Zakah, some other topics. And there are Sunan Abu Dawud. In order, according to the importance, after Bukhari and Muslim, third number comes up the Sunan Abu Dawud. Sunan Abi Dawud. Mostly we quote Abu Dawud, but when we add the Sunan, it becomes Sunan Abi Dawud. Then Sunan Tirmidhi, then Sunan An-Nasai, and Sunan Ibn Majah. Because An-Nasai has at least da'if hadith as compared to Sunan Ibn Majah. In Sunan Ibn Majah there are more da'if hadith than Sunan Nasai, then Sunan Bayhaqi, Sunan Daraqutni. All these books are Sunan. called Mustadrak. Mustadrak is a book which Imam writes a book that he quotes those ahadith which some another Shaykh, another Imam has not accepted. But these ahadith are authentic and sahih according to the conditions and criteria of that Imam. Just like Imam Bukhari, as we discussed, that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he selected these 6,000 ahadith out of how many ahadith? 300,000 ahadith. So as I discussed, that it doesn't mean that all other ahadith were da'if. They were also sahih, most of them. But he had his own special criteria, and also he wanted to write down a book that is Mukhtasar. It is also the name of Sahih Bukhari, Al-Jami' Al-Musnad Al-Sahih Al-Mukhtasar. So it is not possible to quote all 300 or 200,000 hadith when you name the book as Al-Mukhtasar. So Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he compiled a book, Al-Mustadrak, and he mentioned those ahadith which were authentic according to Imam Hakim, according to the criteria of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. And afterward, Imam Zahabi rahimahullah, he also worked on this book, and he also declared this hadith is sahih or not daif. So this is Al-Mustadrak. Then there is the Mu'jam al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Awsat, Mu'jam al-Saghir, Imam Tabrani rahimahullah. And Mu'jam is a book in which the Imam or any Shaykh, he writes, arrange the ahadith according to the narrators. For example, the ahadith of Sahaba, does not start with the name of Sahaba. Or hadiths are arranged according to the names of Shuyukh. For example, Imam, he went to Syria, so he quotes all ahadith of the Shuyukh he heard from in the Syria, the Shuyukh of Syria. Then he went to Iraq, the ahadith that he got from Iraq, then Basra, then Kufa, Medina, Makkah, and Dimashq. So these the ahadith that which he got from Syria, he got in one chapter. So this is what. So Mu'jam al-Kabir, it had 12 volumes. Mu'jam al-Awsat, 6 volumes. And in Mu'jam al-Saghir, the only those hadith which he heard from in the name of Sahaba, not Shuyukh. So these are the some different categories of hadith. And Musannaf is also a form of hadith. Musannaf ibn Abi Shaikh, Musannaf Abdur. And there are some. As I mentioned in my khutbah today, there is a book Al-Mu'jam Al-Mufaharas li Alfaz al-Hadith. This book is compiled by Orientalists. They were not Muslims, but they wanted to have a book that for their benefit. For example, in that Mu'jam Al-Mufaharas, if you know only one part of any hadith, so you can easily find the hadith in that book, and when you consult that book will explain to you which book has mentioned this hadith. For example, you know only the word innama al-a'mal bin-niyat. There are 3 words, innama al-a'mal bin-niyat, an-niyat. So if you know even a single word of any hadith, this book will explain to you that all the books which have quoted this hadith. If you know only innama, so go to the innama category, so it will explain innama al-a'mal bin-niyat, and Bukhari, Muslim, so on books has mentioned in the 4th chapter. So easily you can consult that book. So these books are reference book. We can call Kib, Ummahat al-Kutub, reference book. But there are some other books, as we know, most of brothers, they know the Riyadh al-Salihin. But Riyadh al-Salihin, that best book, written by Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, and Al-Mishkat, Al-Masabih, Bulugh al-Maram, and Arba'in al-Nawawi, most famous book. But these books are not considered as a reference book, because these books, the Aima who wrote these books, who compiled these books, they also mentioned the original books where from they got these ahadith. For example, Riyadh al-Salihin, it is not a reference book. These books are got from Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Nasai. These books are the reference book, but Salihin, Bulugh al-Maram, Arba'in al-Nawawi, and also Mishkat, they are not, but they are favored, and every Muslim, he must keep these books, at least Bulughul Maram, the best book to learn the basic ahkam of our deen. And mostly we remind, we give the, explain the hadith every day after Aisha prayer, Bulughul Maram. And also the Riyadus Salihin, the best book. Every Muslim, he must keep this book in his home, and he must sit with children and discuss the hadith, at least one hadith. And Mishkat, though a bit longer, but this is also the best and the most useful book. So inshallah, we'll carry on this discussion in next talk. I would like to explain the basic terminology, Sahih, Da'if, every Muslim must know, and how the ulama, they had made the terminology. Inshallah, we'll discuss it today, inshallah. Barakallahu fihi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq to learn the hadith of Prophet sallallahu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala include us among these pious people on the day of judgment.